The UK toyed with inheritable 50-year mortgages. Why can't they work in the United States? Okay, so let me give you a little bit of background about this story. I was listening to British news on Sky News. Sky News is on YouTube. I also listen to Indian news on the WION network. I tend to watch a lot of foreign news because I don't trust shit being said on CNN or on MSNBC. Most of the times, Fox, I can't really believe them either because the anti-left slant makes it so difficult to listen to them. A lot of times, I'm just really interested in facts. I'm not really interested in the opinions, and I'm not interested in the editorial caricatures. I don't need you to tell me how I should feel about something. Give me the facts, and I'll decide how to feel about it myself. That's just how I think. So here's the thing. Boris Johnson, before Boris Johnson was forced basically into resignation, Boris Johnson had suggested this idea of having 50-year mortgages in order to make housing more affordable. This would just be another example of the government trying to tilt the scale and ultimately creating a bigger problem down the road just so they can appease a number of millennial and Generation Z buyers in the present. See, ultimately, here's the problem. I'm going to read pretty much most of the story because it's not really a long story. Here's the problem before you even get into this. When you think of a mortgage, first of all, mortgage comes from Old French. It means death pledge. It basically means I'm going to borrow money and I pledge to you on my life that I'm going to pay it back, right? The problem with mortgages in general, especially as we see them here in America, is that mortgages are based around the belief that you're going to purchase your house in your 20s. The belief is that you'll go to college, you'll be about 18 when you go to college, so you have 18, 19, 20, 21. That's about 4 years worth of school. You'll have 4 years worth of school. Chances are you'll meet a woman or a woman will meet a man, and you'll be married somewhere around the time that you're 25, possibly between the age of 25 and 30, possibly 35. So those 10 years you're expected to be married. The belief is that you'll take out a mortgage in order to get the lowest monthly payment. You'll probably stretch it out to 30 years. You'll have a 30-year fixed mortgage. The belief is that you'll stay married, you and your wife will work, pay for this house, and then by the time you're retiring in your late 50s or your early 60s, you'll be retiring, your house will be paid off because the mortgage wouldn't have been tampered with. You'll have paid it off, and you'll be probably downsizing because, when you get that age, you're not going to buy expensive stuff anymore. You're going to downsize. The belief is that at that age, you'd have been hitting Social Security. You'd have Social Security come in as a complement to your savings and to whatever pension you may have. On top of that, your house itself becomes an asset that if you want to sell it, you'd be able to sell it for more money down the road. And when you sell it, you can go into a smaller living space, or you can move to another state, perhaps Florida, where it's cheaper. There's no tax on your pension, or there's no income tax, or whatever it is. Some other state, whatever the rules are, you might move to Texas. I don't know. But the point is, you'd be downsizing and you'd live out your remaining days in less expenses than it cost you to get to your retirement. Here's the problem that I see with Americans. You're wasting all of your goddamn money. Every single month, how many bills do you have? Just be honest. Are you paying, cell phone bills in excess of $100 a month? Even me, I have a $100 a month cell phone bill. And when I think about it, I'm like, wait a minute, I'm paying $100 a month just to make this bastard ring. Then I think about my cable bill. I have Verizon Fios. That cost me $179 a month. Then on top of that, you got your typical utilities, gas, oil, What else you got? Electricity, uh, food, groceries, water bills, sewage bills, so forth and so on. Now, your utilities are pretty much unavoidable. However, you can reduce, reuse, and you can, make those bills cheaper. The problem ultimately is there's so many other subscription services that you're paying for in a month. Maybe you have a gym membership. Maybe you're paying for Disney and Netflix and Hulu and all that stuff. The issue ultimately comes down to you're spending so much of your money that you're really not saving. And that's ultimately what is causing so many Americans to live paycheck to paycheck. Now, Boris Johnson, not to get too far off the point, Boris Johnson came up with the idea, let's make the mortgages 50 years. Now, at first glance, that makes a lot of sense because you could say, okay, instead of 30 years, we'll stretch this payment out longer. Problem is, you can't even be certain that the average person is going to live that long. And well, you know what? Let's read the story real quick. It says, before his resignation as UK's Prime Minister, Boris Johnson told reporters last month that inheritable 50-year mortgages might be able to ease that country's home affordability problem. So basically, you'd buy a house and then you'd pass it down to your children. Well, what about the people who don't have children? Does this house just go back to the state as soon as you die? Because that's pretty much the only logical thing that could happen. Or it could go to somebody else in the family. But if that's true, then that means that that person would automatically be inundated with the debt of your house. And they'd have to now decide, what are they going to do with it? Are they going to sell it or are they going to keep it? Says for Johnson, it's all part of an effort to find creative ways to help people into ownership. Well, these creative ways to help people into ownership is part of the reason why the housing market is a mess right now. And it's also part of the reason why we had the 2008 financial crisis. You see, it's just like Jeff Goldblum said in Jurassic Park. Nature finds a way. Yeah, well, the Federal Reserve finds a way. If they want to build up the illusion of consumer spending being healthy, what they'll do is they'll just put their finger on the scale, and then people start spending money that they shouldn't have or that they shouldn't be spending in the first place. And the next thing you know, you'll have an asset bubble. You'll have a bubble in the housing market. You'll have a bubble in student loans. You'll have a bubble in auto loans. That's where we are now. So anyway, with U.S. homebuyers also struggling to save up colossal down payments and secure affordable mortgage rates, could a similar idea take off here? The reality is most people are going to end up permanent renters. As I was showing you, there's a house that's $750,000. These houses should be no more than about $175,000 tops. However, inflation in the last 20 years has pushed them this ridiculously high. In fact, during 2009, the house that I'm using for my example wouldn't have even cost $300,000 during the 2009 housing bust. A lot of people expect that there's going to be another housing bust. I can tell you right now it's not going to happen. Right now, foreclosures are low. They're not what they were in 2008 and 2009. So for people who think there's going to be a bust, you're fooling yourselves. If you're saving up money, waiting for something to happen, good luck on that. But you're basically going to be chasing the cost of inflation with your money. And unless you get a private sale, chances are you're not going to be able to buy it for anything worth what you've got saved up. Chances are some Chinese buyer, some Indian buyer, or some conglomerate will swoop in, outbid you, and take the house. There was recently an article, and I think I covered it. It said that the Chinese spent $6.1 billion in the U.S. housing market last year alone. And the average price that they were paying above the asking price was about $100,000. So even if you saw a $300,000 house and offered $320,000 for it, you'd still get outbid by the Chinese to the tune of $100,000. So they'd bid $400,000, and there's no way you'd be able to fight that. So anyway, as it stands, the 30-year fixed mortgage remains supreme, with more than 90% of U.S. housing buyers opting for that arrangement, according to a report from Washington-backed mortgage guarantor, Freddie Mac. One reason the 30-year is so popular is that it generally coincides with the time people retire, says Mark Savitt, which is basically what I just explained over and over again. Says, I have a lot of different investors. I don't see any of them offering 50. Most banks are not going to offer 50. I mean, at the very most, I've heard some banks will offer 40-year fixed. But affordability remains a pressing issue for Americans. A study by Porch found 61% of renters in the biggest metropolitan areas in the U.S. are priced out of buying a home, even if they saved up for a substantial down payment. The advantage of a 50-year mortgage would be a considerably lower monthly payment. Now, here's the other problem. Because the Federal Reserve is now raising rates to chase inflation, let's just understand something. Right now, a 30-year fix is about 5%. That's pretty high considering that, like, 4 months ago, it was only 3%. And if they continue raising the interest rates to chase inflation, when we've been told that inflation is 9%, I personally do not believe that they're going to ever be able to get to 9% because by that time the entire economy would have collapsed. They wouldn't even be able to pay the interest on the national debt, which is $30 trillion, if they were to raise interest rates anywhere near 9%. So technically, if you have an interest rate that's lower than inflation, technically you're winning and your house is going to ultimately make you money in the long run once you've paid off the mortgage. The problem is that inflation is going to cost you so much money just to live, your heating bills, your gasoline bills for driving your car, so forth and so on, that you're going to be hurting every single month you're making your payments on your house. So anyway, it says one of these rules is that a qualified mortgage may not have a term longer than 30 years, which makes the 40 and 50 years non-qualified mortgages. So they give some examples. I'll definitely give you the link to this story, but they give some examples. They say, take the example of a $400,000 loan. Like I've shown you how to use a loan calculator, specifically Loan You Later. It says to keep things simple, let's use a fixed interest of 5% for both terms. 30-year mortgage, the monthly payment is $2,147. The total interest would be $373,000. But if you make this a 50-year mortgage, the monthly payment drops down to $1,816. The total interest is going to be $689,933. The difference in monthly mortgage payments is only about $330, but the difference in interest paid over the course of the loan is about $300,000. This type of mortgage was more commonly available in the U.S. in the past. In early 2006, mortgage lenders in Southern California began offering 40 and 50-year fixed-rate mortgages to homebuyers struggling with the area's high prices. Savitt, however, agrees with the idea that 50-year mortgages were a failed experiment. The 50-year mortgage, it's a Band-Aid. It's a temporary fix. Even if homeowners have the option of refinancing when rates drop and moving to the more conventional 30-year mortgage, Savitt isn't keen. That's going to be a payment shock to them because you're taking 20 years off the amortization of your mortgage. Even though the interest rate may bring you down a little bit, you're taking 20 years off, which means your payments are going to be a lot higher. As for making a mortgage inheritable by future generations, it isn't a bad idea, but it's a leap to expect that a borrower's children will have the desire and the means to take up a loan from decades past. Now, that right there is the key. If you leave a house to children, even if they're grown, some of those children might decide, well, I don't want to live here anymore. And they might decide, you know what, I'll sell this place and I'll move, which means that they're starting the cycle over again. The other issue is there's the possibility of divorce. As you know, it's very difficult to trust these quote-unquote modern women. And chances are, if you're a man, you may end up in divorce court and you may be either forced to pay her out of the mortgage. So you may end up having to take out another mortgage on your property. Or you may end up having to sell the house just to pay her half of your goddamn money. Money that you didn't accumulate. This money that was in this house came from your parents. So there are a number of assumptions that are made when you're talking about leaving a house to your kids. For example, on my old block, there was a guy, his name was Mr. Boone, and he left his house to his kids. His kids, one of them did not have a job adequate to pay for that house, and his other kid moved to a different part of the state. Needless to say, the house was basically put into foreclosure and lost. Foreign buyers bought it, chopped it up from a one-family home into a two-family home. Everything that I knew about my neighbor and everything he worked for, all of that was junked out, and that house was gutted. Everything that he set up in that house, gutted, and that was it. I remember I used to go to his house, and I would have a friend there, and we would play Nintendo, and we'd have all the new Nintendo games we'd play in the basement. And long story short, everything he worked for has been taken over by foreign developers, and they're renting that house to like 3 different families right now. So the assumption that you're just going to leave something to your kids is a really bad assumption to make, because in many cases your kids can't handle it. Other than that, all I can really say is the 50-year mortgage, it's obvious, for mathematics' sake, it's not going to work in America. The 40-year mortgage, for mathematics' sake, is not going to work in America. A lot of people are waiting later and later to purchase their first house, and because of that alone, that throws off the entire belief that the 30-year mortgage is a good mortgage. Now, keep in mind, there's a lot of these debt shamers on YouTube who say, oh, you don't need a 30-year mortgage. Oh, why would you think that it takes 30 years to pay off a house? Well, the reality is, yeah, you can get a 10-year mortgage. You can get a 15-year mortgage. You can get a 20-year mortgage. And there are a couple of other debt shamers who will say, yeah, well, you can just pay the whole thing in cash. Well, I don't know too many people, in this case of that I'm going to give you an example, I don't know too many people walking around with $750,000 in cash. And even if you did have that $750,000, just because you have $750,000 doesn't mean that you're going to be able to buy the house, simply because when you attempt to make your offer, other offers that are put on the table may outbid you, which means that if I saved up a pure $750,000 in cash, the Chinese buyer that walks in and says, yeah, well, I'll give you $850 beats me. So again, and you probably know who I'm talking about, because I'm not just talking about one person, I'm talking about multiple people, including Dave Ramsey. There are a lot of people on YouTube who are giving shitty advice, and their shitty advice is part of the reason why some of you may have waited during COVID to purchase a house, only to now wake up and realize that you're not going to be able to. Not only that, but you won't even be able to get a decent apartment because they're so expensive. So basically, it really, concerns me about the future of renting and the future of home ownership, because there are so many people who, based upon the mathematics alone, it's very easy to see that a large percentage of the U.S. population is not going to be able to be homeowners, even if they do have a decent job or they have a decent credit score. You remember how when the Biden administration got in and these Democrats were talking all this bullshit about getting rid of the FICO system? I think I reported on that maybe once or twice based on these news stories. That never happened. The reality is the FICO score system is it's stratification. It's designed to make it so that you have a upper class, a middle class, and a lower class. The upper class basically has credit scores higher than 750, and the middle class has scores below 750, probably ending somewhere around about 650. Anything lower than a 650 is basically lower class. And they do that because they automatically want to stratify you when you go in to get a loan for anything, because that's part of the supply and demand system. Now, what if you don't like it? Shame on you. You can either take your money and save up as much cash as you can possibly get and buy something cash. If you're willing to play along with the system, it means that you're going to have to improve your credit score, and you're going to have a credit score that allows you to qualify for better mortgages. That means you have to be above about a 750, possibly 780, depending upon what the situation is. But the reality is, I just see so much bad information being given out, and it irks me. It's like whenever I hear stupid shit being said, I feel the need to correct it immediately. When I see something or hear something and I'm listening to this and I'm like, this is absolute bullshit that you're saying. But because of these fake ass gurus on the internet, these everybody's a fucking know-it-all simply because they have a little YouTube channel and possibly are hosting panels and playing talk show hosts. Everybody now is a fucking know-it-all, and that drives me crazy. And I'm not talking as a person just who sold houses. I'm not talking as a person just who worked at a bank. No. I'm talking as a person who's giving out information, whether you choose to take it or not. But I'm appalled by the amount of stupid shit that I hear being said. But what's worse than that is it goes completely unchallenged. YouTube took away dislike buttons. You can't, even if you hear something that you know is bullshit, you can't even simply push the dislike button and affect the future where somebody might see it and be like, hey, you know what? A lot of people dislike this. Maybe this is bad information. They've basically made it so that bullshit spreads and you can't question it. And there's so many examples of that. Like, for instance, COVID-19. Think about all the information that was bogus. And you didn't find out it was bogus until later, because anytime somebody tried to question that information, they were immediately shut down or silenced. Think about right now, you got this monkeypox thing. Certain communities are affected more than others. Any information contrary to what the WHO says is either shut down or silenced. Your politics. You know, it's funny when I argue with certain people and they think, oh, yeah, well, I'm free to do what I want. I'm free to say. You can't even say what you want anymore, because when you go into these public forums on the internet, because of the fact that it may be considered a private platform or a private corporation owns it, they can literally silence you, or you have to hide your videos and you have to take them down. You believe you're free. It's an illusion of freedom. You're not free to do. You're not free. You're not. And if you were in public doing the same shit, like some people, first of all, constitutionally, the government never had a right to force you to get a vaccination. They never had that right. There's nothing in the Constitution that gives them that right. Nothing at all. Look how long it took for the Supreme Court to make rulings to tell the government that, no, you can't do that. Look how long it took. So what did you do as an American citizen? Well, you just went along with it because you felt that you had no choice, or you were being threatened. You were being coerced. So these people who are walking around, oh, yeah, well, I'm free and blah, blah, blah. Some of you, shit, you got a Second Amendment. You can't even have more than 10 bullets in your gun because you're so free. You can't say certain things. You can't say certain things about certain people because you're so free. That don't sound like freedom to me. But on this subject specifically, government trying to manipulate the housing market. First of all, there's nothing constitutional about that because they're supposed to stay out of it. It's supposed to be a private contract between me and the bank. 14th Amendment, supposedly. That's the private contracts. There's nothing constitutional about the government manipulating the housing market. And because the government continues to manipulate the housing market, that's the reason why we get these asset bubbles. That's the reason why you get the foreclosure crisis. That's the reason why you get the problem that we're seeing now, because government tried to manipulate the housing market. Continues on to student loans. The government's not supposed to be in student loans. But what do? You get asset bubbles. You get these bullshit student loan degrees that are fake, underwater basket weaving, women's studies PhD and all this nonsense, paid for by the taxpayers. And most of these people default because they get these degrees. They can't even pay them back. Government's not supposed to be in those student loans. So I hope you understand what my point is. My point is that this manipulation has been tried, and of course, it was tried in California. And just to placate the masses, try to try to pacify the voters, these government manipulations are done. And when they're done, they usually backfire. Europe, UK, it's not America. They don't have the same constitution. Theirs is very different than ours. They ran this idea, but even they know it's a bad idea. Now, there are some European countries, like Hungary, where the government basically subsidizes women just to have children. If you're in Hungary, Hungary will give you a minivan to have children. You can look this up. Hungary is giving pregnant women minivans in order to get them to have more kids. You can look it up. Hungary giving women minivans. But when government manipulation is done, usually what ends up happening is it runs up the taxes on the citizen. Higher taxes equal a less happy citizen. Higher taxes equal a worse housing market. Higher taxes tend to cause more problems. So that's the bottom line. The government should not be in these systems. And because the government's in these systems, it creates problems that now the next generation is attempting to deal with. You want a little bit of a tour of a house for sale. And this, you see this is a single family house. They want $750,000 for this house. And it's only got a half dormer, but they say it's a legal 2-family, which in reality it's a 1-family house that's been pretty much made so that the top floor can have one renter on the top floor and 1 or 2 renters on the main floor. So I'm about to show you what this looks like. So everybody, you see this? This is what real estate looks like right now in New York. Now, I'm fortunate that I was able to buy 2 houses prior to the COVID pandemic. But you see this little ass house, they want $750,000 for this. This is New York City. This is inside New York City. Property taxes are, about $5,000 a year. Property tax is about $5,000 a year. All of the houses look exactly like this. They want $750,000. And let me tell you something, they're gonna get it. So what they did was they half dormered this house. Now a full dormer would have turned this entire triangular roof into a big square. And then they would have raised the triangle to top off the square. So the issue with all of the houses on this block is that they're all triangle top floors. So that means that you lose a lot of space to the wall here, as you can see. So what they do on these houses is when the foreign developers buy them, they buy them and then they fully dormer the houses. Because if you half dormer the house, then this is all you get. You get this little ass kitchen right here. You see this little kitchen with this little bullshit door right here. Look at that. And then on the side that's dormered, you have a little bathroom. So this is what a half dormer looks like. Now here's the problem, everybody. And I've tried to talk to you about this in my videos. Because, now look at, I want you to look at this doorway. Now, watch this. Look at this. This is my height. Look how tall I am. Look how tall I am. Look at this. Look at this shit. Look at this. Look at this. See this? Look at this. This is my height compared to the door. Look at that. I am 6'6", roughly 2 meters tall. Now look at this. I'm just standing straight up. This is the height of the door. I want y'all to see that. I want y'all to see that. I want to take a picture. I want to take a selfie of this. In fact, let me see if I can take a selfie. No. I'll just screen cap. Look at this shit. Look at this shit. So this is what passes for. I got it scrunched down like I'm Gulliver's Travels in Lilliput. This is what passes for a bedroom. So first of all, you've already lost a large amount of your ceiling to the triangular roof. What's funny is houses on this block, a lot of those houses have doorways that are cut higher. So even though as you can see, even though I can't walk through this doorway, most of the other houses have doorways cut higher. Okay, now this is your view out the back. Reminds me of something that I see when I'm in the Philippines or a third world nation. That's your view out the back. So I want you to notice that there's a trucking company across the street. There's John F. Kennedy Trucking Companies. So that's your beautiful view of your trucking company and your third world Filipino 10 roofs out there. That's your view. And then in your room, you have this little storage space right here. Now, see, that's the problem. If you don't fully dormer these houses, you see, because I need you to understand, because of this triangular roof, all of this space that could have been converted into a big square top for the second floor, you lose all of that space on both sides. So you lose that much space on this side, and then behind this wall, you lose even more. You lose the same amount of space on this side because basically you're dealing with two shapes. You're dealing with a square and you're dealing with a triangle. So that is the top floor of this house. So let's go on down to the bottom floor. That's the top floor. Okay, so this is 750,000. Now I want you to notice something. These houses in New York City were all single family houses. So if you go back to the 1990s, all of these houses would have been $150,000, maybe even tops $165,000. But now, because they're inside New York City and because they're reasonably nice spaces, they want $750,000 in 2022. Okay, I just need you to understand that. They call it a legal two-family, but it's really not. What it is that they have a door to lock off the top floor, and usually what they'll do is they'll have a door to lock off the basement. So you can really get three families in here, but what it means is that somebody has to be willing to live in the basement, somebody has to be willing to live in the top floor, and somebody's living in the middle floor. Let's go on downstairs, let's see what. Nice woodwork, I will say. These houses have nice woodwork because they were made back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. A lot of nice custom wood. Back, this is a back room on the first floor. Back room. This is a secondary room in the back. Nice little squares. Nice little square room right here. And then you have a bathroom right here. Simple bathroom, right? Very simple bathroom. All the houses are designed the exact same way. Okay. And then they showed them the basement. This is the basement. Now the basement in just about all of these houses, I want you to understand they got oil heat, so that's already a problem. Now, the house shares oil, but they don't share electricity. So whoever's on that middle floor gets their own electricity. God knows who was doing what in the basement, but it looks like they rented this shit out.
And now that oil is so expensive, it's going to probably be more.
Oh, tell me about it.
Okay. All right. Now, is there an open out to, is there an egress from here to the outdoors?
750,000, everybody. If I'm not mistaken, this is the gas meter. This is the gas. For natural gas heat. or for heating your stove. And then over here, and in that little closet, you have the electric. So you got electric, you got gas, you got oil. And by the way, the ceilings are low. You see the ceiling? Look at my head. All the ceilings are low because I'm 2 fucking meters tall, so all the ceilings are low. Look at this ceiling, look at the ceiling. Look at the ceiling, look at my head, look at my head, look at that. Yep, $750,000, my friend, for all of this inside Queens, New York. I paid less than $300,000 for both of my houses. $750,000, my friends. All this for $750,000. $750,000, my friends. $750,000. $750,000.
To be continued.